Hi, I'm Ken Atchity, and today I want to tell you about my latest novel, Brae MacKenzie, a novel of mythic identity. And maybe first talk about how it came about that I wrote a romance novel when my last book was about ancient Rome and Christianity. I have been in love with romance most of my life, and when I left the academic world, it was to produce what turned out to be a series of 16 romance movies called Shades of Love, even to the point where the New York Times had a full-page story about it and introduced me as Mr. Romance, which I love to think about. It's a while back, but over the years since then, the 20 years where I've been making other movies and publishing many books, including romance books, I found a manuscript that I'd written back then about a trip to Scotland and turned it into a romantic quest of a modern day uh, woman living in San Francisco, a professional artist, for her roots. And this resulted in Brae MacKenzie and the first in what I hope will be a series of novels of mythic identity. So, that much said, I just like to read to you chapter 7, which is a short chapter. It occurred to Brae as the train pulled out of Euston, then into the equally dark overhead of the London skyscape, that the bustle and panic of nearly missing it allowed her to overlook the fact that she didn't really know where she was going. She'd spotted a cell phone service center, stopped to grab a UK SIM card, and tested it with a quick call to Tommy, then to Davis, to leave a message about her decision. She looked up to see she had 3 minutes to get on platform 4. The coach doors were sliding closed when she wedged the largest bag into them and forced her way on. The train was going to Glasgow, that much she understood. But why was she going to Glasgow? Where was Eriseg, the town her father talked about with a tear in his eye, in relationship to Glasgow? Now she remembered it was on the west coast. She would Google it to figure out how to get there from the Glasgow station. Staring at her grimy reflection in the coach window, she burst into laughter. Jazz, her agent, would kill her, if he ever found her. Suddenly she felt freer and more exuberant than she could remember feeling in years. She could imagine the resounding approval in her father's voice when he received her message and learned where she was heading. She settled back into the upright seat, worn with the sleeves of a million London refugees, and made the first plan she had consciously made unassisted in months. When she got to Glasgow, she would get off the train and find another heroic taxicab. She would check into the closest hotel and unpack, giving herself a day or two to get her bearings. She would locate Eriseg and figure out the best way to get there. She would also call Davis again and ask him exactly what happened to her grandmother that would make her write such a letter. She recalled vaguely that his mother had died of cancer and that she was doing something that would surprise everyone before she died, but no one reported what it was. If she couldn't solve the riddle of her own life, Brae decided, she could solve a family mystery. That would be of some use, and anything by way of solution would be a lot more than a little satisfaction. The strain of all this orderly and purposeful thinking and the rhythmic clicking of the rails made it easier for her to nod off. When she woke up, the outside night had given way to first inklings of dawn over the lush British countryside. Brae looked out the window in amazement at the myths rising across meadows high with grass between stately oak trees. The disembodied heads of sheep, suspended in the morning mist that blanketed the earth, stared at the passing train like the caterpillar in Alice in Wonderland, as if to say, "Who are you?" "One might ask you the same," Brae replied silently, "you with the invisible legs." She caught a glimpse of an endless hillside overgrown with Boston ferns when the train entered a tunnel. The overhead lights flicked on. The conductor stopped to check her ticket. "Where are we?" Brae asked. "When we come out of the tunnel," he said, "we'll be in Scotland." Brae's pulse quickened as she turned back to the still dark window, where she saw only her own face, flushed with anticipation. Then she gasped as the sunlight dazzled her. They were in the midst of what looked like an infinite forest of perfect Christmas trees. "Scotch pines," the conductor said, noticing her expression over his shoulder. "Quite remarkable, aren't they? Descendants of the ancient Caledonian forest." Brae had nothing to say. She was fascinated. Of course it made sense that Scotch pines would be found in Scotland. She wondered whether Christmas also came from this country she'd never visited. Hadn't even thought of that much. But which was the origin of her father's family and of her own name. The trees were blue-green in the dawn and lined with a silver aura she couldn't blink away, and therefore had to believe was real. Brambles covered the ground as the train rushed northward, and Brae felt something, stir, though she had no idea what it was. Then they were in the broad, well-cultivated valley of Nithsdale, the old track running along the river Nith, past ruined walls, and always in the distant mist, crumbled towers. Everywhere, flocks of long-haired sheep. A commercial town, the station sign read Sankar, then mining country for an hour, and just as she returned from the scrambled eggs, toast, and marmalade of the dining car, the outskirts of Glasgow. Passing through the space between cars, Brae could smell the brisk air and pinched herself because she was seeing and smelling and feeling again. Feeling the pinch, she feared she was in someone else's body, and this feeling had to be a dream. Trudging the endless length of the train, now parked and blowing off exhaust in Central Station, Glasgow, made the dream more real. The crowd of passengers made its way like a determined wave through the crowd of greeters heading in the opposite direction. An eddy would form when a greeter met a passenger, and the two streams for that moment matched and stopped and circled while the main tides continued around the spot. Determined to make her way on her own without availing herself of the services offered by dour-looking porters, Brae fixed her attention on the distant sign that read, "To Street and Transport." So fixed was her concentration that she nearly knocked over a tall man standing like a rock directly in her path. Brae jerked back in embarrassment and momentary confusion, forgetting she was in a country that spoke her language. "Excuse me," she finally said. "I should watch where I'm going." "Miss Brae MacKenzie, is it?" asked the man, unaccountably, in an accent that belied the word she heard. He spoke the syllables of her name as though they formed a rhythmic talisman, and as though the speaking were the most difficult spell he'd undertaken in a long, long time. "I am Damon," he added. Brae was startled as much by the suggestion of intimacy as by the event itself. Maybe this whole thing is a dream, she thought. She wondered how she was supposed to know that, and what she was supposed to do about it next. She stared into the man's face, which was both strange and familiar at the same time, and found no solution on its surface. And I think I'll stop there because it's a good hanging point of obviously introducing the other main character in the story. So I hope you get a chance to read the book, Brae MacKenzie, and let me know your thoughts about it. Really appreciate your listening, and talk to you again.